Hello there. Welcome to Virtual Storytime. My name is Ariadne Appletree, and today I'm going to read one of my books that I wrote and illustrated called The Tiny Things That Timothy Saw. Let's get started. Let me tell you the tale of Timothy Tall, a boy who could see the impossibly small. From seeds to sand and all in between, Timothy Tall could see the unseen. Now it's not that his eyes were awfully good, just pretty average and saw like they should, but Timothy took just a little bit longer to look at the things not many would ponder. Some thought he was strange for lagging behind to follow some ants to see what they'd find. But Timothy knew that the smaller you go, the more amazing the world that lived down below. On this one day, he lost track of time, and before he knew it, had been left behind. Alone in the forest, he began to cry, until a round little figure caught his teary eye. Perched on his nose, no bigger than a dot, was a gnome who appeared to be talking a lot. It seemed as though he wanted him to see something to do with a particular tree. He turned his head to see a lovely old oak, just as the trunk was beginning to smoke. All of a sudden the tree started to glow, and a hole opened up with wonders to show. The little gnome waved for him to go through, but Timothy was scared and not sure what to do. There was fear in his heart, but something else too, a twinge of excitement that steadily grew. As soon as he made his mind up to go, several vines shot out of the hole. They wrapped around his body and face and pulled him into the glowing space. He whirled and swirled down the tunnel of light for a time that felt like it took all night. But just as he begged the world to slow down, he landed quite softly on a green hill's crown. After allowing his head to stop spinning, he opened his eyes to see someone grinning. The little fat gnome was little no more, or Timothy had shrunk to the size of a pore. "You're finally here," the gnome screeched with delight. "We're all so happy you managed the flight." Then behind him the bushes began to rustle, and more little gnomes emerged from the bustle. One by one they placed gifts at his feet, strange little boxes that looked really neat. "But what are they for?" he asked in wonder. But just then the ground started to thunder. All of the gnomes screamed and then fled as Timothy's body filled with pure dread. His eyes opened wide as it came into view, a huge, nasty troll that smelt like mildew. It took one look and roared so loud that the trees around it fell over or bowed. "Get out of my land!" it yelled with great rage. "These are my gnomes, and they'll stay in their cage." Just when he was about to give in to his fear, he felt a soft little whisper in his left ear. He turned to see the gnome in great distress, the gnome who pulled him into this ridiculous mess. "Please don't leave, we need you so," said the chubby gnome, his eyes full of woe. "This isn't the way our world should be. Before that mean troll, we were happy and free." Timothy looked from the gnome to the troll and wished he never went through that stupid hole. This wasn't his fight, so why was he here? It wasn't his fault that he saw so clear. "How do I fight something so big? He is a giant and I am a twig." "He is the darkness that hides inside. Show him the light and the dark will go hide." The gnome floated down to the boxes below, and strangely, all of them started to glow. "Only those who can truly see can put these together and find the key. I'll buy you some time and throw sand in his eyes. It won't last very long because of his size, but it might just work, so wait for my cue. Don't be afraid, or he'll smell it on you." Then, with a sharp snap, the gnome vanished from sight, and a loud, angry howl tore through the night. Timothy knew he had no time to waste, and rushed to the pile, making great haste. At first the weird boxes confused his mind. He wasn't quite sure what he was supposed to find. Then something inside told him to slow down and look for the piece that was yet to be found. The troll stumbled round in a great deal of pain, stomping and smashing, all more of the same, when Timothy noticed a bright little glow on the chest of the troll where his heart should go. All at once, in a glorious moment, the knowledge was given in unseen bestowment. If the troll was made of dark like the night, then these glowing boxes could fill it with light. As soon as the thought came into his mind, the boxes floated up and started to bind. They whirled around in a glorious flame and gently merged with the troll's whole frame. Like sand through the hand, the cruel troll vanished, and all of the darkness that had been was now banished. The gnomes reappeared, cheering loudly with glee, for he had conquered the darkness that so few could see. Out of the crowd, the chubby gnome appeared, smiling quite widely and twisting his beard. "I knew you could do it! This much is true! I knew when you saw me that it could only be you. For only those who are curious enough to see can learn the secrets kept by the really tiny. There are worlds upon worlds where knowledge is stored. If you're brave enough to go searching, you'll never be bored. And now you must go, my unusual friend, back to your world with light you must tend. But whenever you feel like you are alone, remember the world that you have been shown." Timothy bid goodbye to the nice little gnomes and jumped in the tunnel, headed for home. Next thing he knew, he was outside the tree that housed tiny creatures who helped him to see. The hole was long gone, but he could still hear all of the gnomes as they continued to cheer. He patted the trunk and set on his way to follow the light, no longer afraid. The end. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you liked the tiny things that Timothy saw.
Hi, I'm Dean Smith, and I'm going to read my story, Leonard the Loon. Leonard the Loon lay still in his nest, the greenish-brown shells a broken mess. For just yesterday he'd opened his eyes and seen the big world, much to his surprise. Bert, the red-winged blackbird, said hi as he flitted, flapped, and flew by. This was nothing like inside the egg at all, surrounded by reeds and bulrushes so tall. When Leonard looked up, he saw nothing but blue, with the occasional white puff or two. And when he peered out through the reeds, all he could see were dark green trees. Glass-like blue water all around him lay, protected from wind in a little bay. The lake was so clear, Leonard saw right down to the mud where Tommy Turtle was found. Tommy came up and poked out his head. "Welcome to Jim Smith Lake," Tommy said. Then he smiled and went on his way, looking for a log to sunbathe. The air was full of sounds so sweet. Roxy Robin went tweet, 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 and Charlie sang chickadee-dee-dee, while Phil Flicker cried, "Look at me!" Just then, a trembling, cackling came, echoing over, familiar but strange, a lonely, haunting, reassuring sound. and off Fisher Peak it seemed to rebound. Mother was saying, "Come out for a dip." He wasn't sure. He'd never made that trip. Leonard looked at his sister, still asleep, and the shallow bay seemed suddenly deep. Then Mum encouraged, "You'll be fine. The water's warm and it's a short climb. Down from the nest, so cozy and dry. It'll be fun. Just give it a try." So he took a big breath and waddled along and closed his red eyes and tried to be strong. Then he felt a strange, cool, watery caress and instinctively gave his flippers a test. This was really fun and came quite naturally, and his brown fuzzy down kept him warm as can be. Mother smiled and clapped her wide white wings. "If you try, you can do anything." Leonard looked over his shoulder just then. Lana was wide awake and watching them. "Come on in. It's really, really great." And his sister didn't hesitate. They laughed as she splashed and got her head wet. And in the middle of the bay they met. Then Father came up from a deep dive and joined his family side by side. They practiced for a while, very near the nest, and climbed on Dad's back when they needed a rest. A golden canoe slowly floated on by, and little Lily couldn't believe her eyes, for she'd never seen a real loon before. Not only one, but a family of 4. Lana winked as she drifted away. She was sure that they'd made Lily's day. Then Father said that it's time for some lunch. Another adventure was Leonard's hunch. He heard his stomach growling then. He could eat not 1 fish, but 10. Suddenly, swiftly, his daddy dove, and Leonard saw a flash in the cove of shimmering silver in amongst the reeds as a black and white streak skimmed above the weeds. Just as quick, Father returned, a fine crayfish he had earned. He opened his bill, and so did his son. Just like that, the family lunch was done. That meal was so yummy, Leonard wanted more, and started underwater to explore. This was another whole new world down here, and each time he dove, he conquered his fear. But he still hadn't quite caught his first fish. When he did, it would be so delish. He chased salamanders and snails too. Any old kind of crustacean would do. Oh, it was tasty, just as he thought, that precious prey that he finally caught. Leonard swam to Lana and told her his tale, and by the end it turned into a huge whale. That afternoon the wind whipped and stirred, and their delightful day was disturbed. The waves tossed and tumbled the band, so the kids retreated to land. The big black storm clouds covered the sun, and they huddled together as one. Then there was a yellow flash so bright, it surely could have lit up the night. Then thunder boomed and shook the nest. This was nature's bravery test. Leonard looked up when he felt a drop, and all around he heard plop, plop, plop. He wondered how long the nasty storm would last. Then as fast as it started, it blew right past. Mom and Dad called, "Don't worry, it's over." And the air smelled just as sweet as clover. Slowly, carefully, he set out once more, for Leonard had been shaken to the core. But soon he was swimming and diving like mad, and his heart was light and so very glad. Off in the reeds he saw a strange fellow, long-beaked and long-necked and rather mellow. "How goes it, mate?" said Blue Heron Henry, wading slowly along and quite friendly. "I'm fine, sir. Made it through the storm. It was my first, but now I'm warm." "Good for you, laddie. You're very brave," and spread his wide wings and flew away. "I wish I could fly like Henry some day," thought Leonard as he watched him cross the bay. He stretched out his wings and gave them a flap. "I'm going to start practicing that." Suddenly, he heard a screech on high, and Oliver Osprey went soaring by. Then he dove down like a swift fighter jet and came up with a trout wriggling and wet. After that, Mother gently glided down, landing beside him with a skimming sound. "Wow," said Leonard, very impressed. "I can't wait for my first flight test." "You'll be ready soon, my son, racing around the lake for fun." Then she smiled and he climbed aboard, tired and not quite ready to soar. Later at dusk, a symphony began, Mum and Dad singing as loud as they can, rippling like laughter across the still lake, keeping the drowsy young duo awake. The full moon rose and the music died down, and there was not even a single sound, except for 4 happy hearts beating as one, dreaming about today and tomorrow's sun. I hope you enjoyed my story, Leonard the Loon.
Hi, I'm Jody Jacob, and I'm going to read my story, The Man and the Bear. There was a man, he lived in the bush. He lived alone, that was his wish. There came a bear, walked through his door, and the man fell back upon the floor. And the bear said, "Grr, grr, grr." And the man said, "Oh?" And the bear said, "Grr, grr, grr." And the man said, "Oh?" And the bear said, "Grr, grr, grr." And the man said, "Oh!" And he frightened that bear away. Next, this man, he climbed a tree. He wanted to see how far he could see. There came a bird perched on his head, and the man fell down in the red rose bed. And the bird said, "Tweet, tweet, tweet." And the man said, "Oh?" And the bird said, "Tweet, tweet, tweet." And the man said, "Oh?" And the bird said, "Tweet, tweet, tweet." And the man said, "Oh!" And he frightened that bird away. Last week this man, out for a stroll, He fell into a mining hole. When he looked up, all he could see was a great big nest and a bunch of bees. Oh. And the bees said, buzz, buzz, buzz. And the man said, oh. And the bees said, buzz, buzz, buzz. And the man said, oh. And the bees said, buzz, buzz, buzz. And the man said, oh. And frightened the bees away. Now this old man who lives alone, he bought himself a telephone. When he is down, so sad and blue, he picks up the phone and he calls you. And you can help with this part. And he says, yakety, yakety, yak. And you say, oh. And he says, yakety, yakety, yak. And you say, oh. And he says, yakety, yakety, yak. And you say, oh. And you frighten him away. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed The Man and the Bear.
My name is Ariadne Appletree, and today I'm going to read one of my books for you, Bethany, Blair, and the Bugs in Her Hair. Bethany Blair was a strange one, it's true. She always appeared to have nothing to do. She'd lie in the grass each and every day, and the bugs liked her so much, they decided to stay. Not before long, some had made their home on the curly strands of her auburn dome. But while many out there would flick them away, Bethany Blair preferred that they stay. See, the fireflies put on the most wonderful show. When the sun went down and the moon would glow, Daddy Longlegs was always first to dance, though some might say it looked more like a prance. Then the little silkworm with his threads so thin would drop in for his crazy spin. But the ladybug always settled everything down, though she did it with kindness and never a frown. This oddball group loved each and every day where Bethany would get to come out and play. For in Bethany's school, no bug was allowed, and if one was spotted, things were sure to get loud. So Bethany's bugs did their very best to keep themselves hidden from all the rest. They'd nap in her hair until the teacher was done, explaining how planets dance with their sun. Now their secret was safe until one fateful day, when the children were told to go out and play. Bethany tripped and fell in the crowd. The bugs fell too, and the room got loud. Bobby Woo belched the most terrible scream, while Becky Preen's face turned green. The teacher appeared with a frown on his face and told Bethany bugs weren't allowed in this place. So Bethany found a nook in a tree to keep her bugs safe until she was free. But when Bethany returned back to her desk, she quickly noticed she was apart from the rest. The kids around her had all moved away. Not a single one had decided to stay. And then Tammy McKay passed her a note and made a face that looked like a goat. She had drawn a picture of Bethany Blair, but with stinky lines coming from her hair. So class became a lonely place where none of the kids would speak to her face. But when the bell would ring for breaks each day, she'd run to her bugs and get lost in play. They spent their days playing silly games, like building stick castles with ridiculous names. And when Bethany would have to go back to class, her bugs made her smile from behind the glass. So Bethany learned that to be on your own did not mean you had to feel all alone. One day after school, Bethany headed for home when she heard someone yell that they'd broken a bone. She rushed down the hill to find Bobby Woo, holding his ankle and turning quite blue. She smiled sweetly and offered her hand, kindly attempting to help him to stand. "Don't worry, Bobby, I'll help you back. You can lean on me. I'll pick up the slack. Get someone else. You simply won't do. I'm sorry, but Tammy can't see me with you. You know what she's like, how mean she can be. What happened to you could happen to me. She could not pretend his words did not hurt, but she would not leave Bobby alone in the dirt. So she quickly found a teacher at school to save Bobby the pain of looking uncool. One day, Becky Preen was wandering around, mumbling about something that couldn't be found. So Bethany asked if she needed a hand, looking for what she had lost in the sand. Becky looked scared to see Bethany there, standing so close with those bugs in her hair. She took a quick look to see who was around, then whispered so softly there was barely a sound. I don't need your help. Please go away. I'll find Grandma's ring on a sunnier day. Then Becky ran off as fast as she could, and Bethany sat down, not feeling so good. But just as she started to break down and cry, something quite shiny caught her shimmering eye. And what should she see next to the ladybug's wing? Becky Preen's golden ring. Bethany waited to find Becky alone, to return the ring her grandma had owned. Becky seemed shocked, but mumbled, "Thank you," then hurried off before anyone knew. The days carried on with not that much change. All of the kids still thought she was strange. But her bugs knew just how to make Bethany grin and helped her care less about not fitting in. One day, as she watched the fireflies glow, she heard a soft cry from the stairwell below. She hurried down to find Tammy McKay with a stain on her pants that would not go away. When Tammy saw Bethany standing there, anger inside of her started to flare. "Get out of here now," she yelled with dismay. "I'll make your life worse if you don't go away." Bethany grabbed gym shorts from her pack, handed them to Tammy, and turned her back. After Tammy had changed, she thanked Bethany Blair, but asked her why she had bothered to care. Bethany thought for a moment or two, then said, "It just felt like the right thing to do. I know that to some, quite strange I may seem. It's okay you don't like me, but I'll never be mean." When Bethany arrived at school the next day, all of the kids started running her way. Tammy McKay was leading the crowd, with Bobby and Becky all looking quite proud. After everyone gathered around Bethany Blair, she noticed they all had bugs in their hair. Some had one, or most had one, some had many. Tammy McKay had named hers Lenny. All of the kids could finally see that a heart led with kindness is absolute key, and it makes no matter if one is big or small, just open your heart and be kind to them all. And now we must leave dear Bethany Blair, all her new friends and the bugs in her hair. But never you worry, I know she'll be fine, for she is good, brave, and remarkably kind. The end. I hope you enjoyed that book. And thank you for joining me for virtual story time. Have a wonderful day.
Leonard the Loon can't go to the moon, but he'll be able to fly soon. Leonard the Loon gets up before noon, singing out a good morning tune. He hatched brand new just before June, and shivered when a thunderstorm boomed. Leonard the Loon will dive deep in the blue, fishing like his daddy can do. Fishing like his daddy can do.